Welcome to this episode of the Greater Phoenix Chamber's podcast, Let's Talk Business Phoenix, with me, your host, Todd Sanders, President and CEO of the Greater Phoenix Chamber. In each episode, we tackle important issues and subjects affecting our businesses, our community, and the state today. Through relevant, timely topics, this podcast serves as the business community's voice with the mission of championing business growth, identifying problems that restrict economic development, and conveying community leaders to move Phoenix forward. Well, welcome back to the podcast. We are honored today to have the 24th Governor of the state of Arizona, Governor Katie Hobbs, with us. Governor, what an honor. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Well, first of all, congrats on the election. We're so pleased to see you as governor. Tell me a little bit about yourself. I mean, we heard a lot about you during the campaigns and everything, but tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe something that we wouldn't see on a bio or we wouldn't hear from your team or maybe your website.
Sure. Well, I think everyone knows now that I'm a born and raised Arizonan. I grew up in Tempe, although Wikipedia says I was born there and I was not. So
where were you born?
I was born in Phoenix.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So we moved to Tempe when I was 6. And I have an identical twin sister, which also she is a little more well known now than she used to be. But if you see someone out in the wild with no security that looks just like me, it's probably her. So, and she's actually a teacher in the Scottsdale Unified School District. So, I also have 2 other siblings. So let's see, something else about me that's not in my bio. I am an avid exerciser, so I get up pretty early to go exercise, give the detail a run for their money. And I was on a really great running streak until I injured my foot. So trying to get back to running again.
Well, and I think I saw you in one of the runs just recently. Maybe it was.
I did. Well, I was going to do the rock and roll half, and I injured my foot in the 5K the day before.
Okay.
So,
Okay. Excellent. And I'm assuming for your sister, that's supposed to be an interesting ride as well, given that there are probably some mistakes there.
Oh, yeah, for sure. People see her walk in a room and think it's me and get all excited. And they're also excited to meet her. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and I think what makes you an interesting governor is the fact that you understand the legislative process. Mm-hmm. You were in the legislature. Talk a little bit about that experience and how that shaped your worldview as it relates to being governor.
Yeah, well, I think I have to go back to what got me to the legislature, and I'm a social worker, which is also features very prominently in my bio. But that's really what got me into politics. I was working with victims of domestic violence and ended up wandering into the policy arena, and legislation is really frustrating. It's, as you know, I mean, it's hard to get something passed that's really meaningful, and change is usually very incremental, and even things that are seemingly nonpartisan, like holding domestic violence offenders accountable, it's really challenging. And so I got frustrated, and at the same time connected with folks who sort of mentored me into the political process and decided to run. Knocked on a lot of doors for Senator Sinema when she first won her first race. That was my first campaign volunteer experience.
And you came back after doing that, which is tough to do, right? It's hard to knock on doors cold.
It is. But I think, it's really, as a leader, I don't like asking people to do things I haven't done. And I think to be a good candidate, you kind of have to know what it's like to be out there knocking on doors. And so I got to the legislature and really felt like I had an opportunity to be a voice for people that didn't tend to have a voice there. And I think for me, it's really about making government work for people. And I got to do that a little bit in the legislature. And I got to do that a little bit more in the Secretary of State's office. And certainly as governor, I have the biggest opportunity to do that that I've had. And so far, it's something I hope I never take for granted. So
absolutely. And I think that story, and talking to policymakers, that's always an interesting story. Mm-hmm. What got you there? And I'm assuming getting to the legislature, and having those first few weeks there, probably a lot different than what you expected.
Yeah, I mean, I think I had spent some time around, so I knew a little bit of how things worked, but certainly you don't always see the back end of the process, and there's just a lot of process.
There is a lot of process and a lot of give and take, hopefully, right?
Yeah, no, I think when things work well, there is give and take, and nobody likes to compromise, but that's really how the best laws are made.
Well, that's how we got our Constitution, correct?
Yes, yeah.
I agree with you 100%. So first few months here in office, how's it been? Give us a little report.
So it's been really busy. I've been all over the state. We are making it a point to reach out to groups that maybe haven't had a chance to meet with the governor or have a voice with the governor. So a lot of folks up to our office on the 9th floor, but also just getting out into communities to really listen and hear from folks how we build an Arizona for everyone and make sure that we're continuing on the great economic trajectory that we're on, but that we're being inclusive and allowing Arizonans to thrive from the economic growth that we're experiencing.
Well, I've been watching your Twitter page, your Instagram page, and you have. I mean, it's amazing how many different groups you've met with. What have you learned so far?
That oftentimes people just need to feel heard. It's something I knew as a social worker, but I'm getting to put it in practice in the governor's office, and it's been really rewarding. And I've approached this office as someone who's going to have an open door even when we don't always agree. But having that open door is such an important gesture, and people are really being responsive to that.
Absolutely. Well, the first week of May is National Small Business Week. I'm sure the first week. Talk to us about what are your administration's priority for small business, for the economy, for jobs?
Yeah, so small businesses, as you know, are such an important part of our economy, employ nearly half of our state's workforce. And we have some really good anchors with Local First as an example. But what we want to try to do is really expand access to capital. It's hard to get a small business loan, and I think that we've been leaving a lot of federal dollars on the table that we could be leveraging. So we're going to be really focused on that to create those opportunities for small businesses to start and grow. When I was in the Secretary of State's office, we focused a lot on business services and how we could make sure that folks that were looking to start a business had that streamlined experience. And so it was really important for us to get on board with the state's Business One Stop. And I know that under Secretary Fontes that is continuing. So we're going to look for ways that we can ensure that the small businesses that are such a robust part of our economy are able to continue to grow here.
Well, I'm glad to hear you talk about sort of the red tape side of the equation, and clearly that time of the Secretary of State's office helped you understand that. And I think for large companies, they don't love it, right?
Yeah.
Of course not, but they can navigate. And small and mid-sized businesses really struggle.
Yep.
And certainly there's a cost to doing business when it comes to that red tape.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the larger companies have sort of the infrastructure and the department to just navigate all of that. Not saying that we should make it harder, but no. And I saw this when I was, working as a social worker in the nonprofit world as well. Getting those grant applications, if you have a whole department to do that, it's much easier, and it's the smaller folks that need more assistance and support.
So to your point about sort of the economy, strong economy in Arizona, unbelievably strong. What are some of the economic policies you're thinking about in terms of making sure that we're on a path of growth?
Yeah. No, I think that's so critical. I mean, I couldn't imagine coming in as governor at a more opportune time in our state and where we are economically, the path that we're on, and just everything that's sort of coming together to create this perfect moment in Arizona that we definitely need to capitalize on. Again, so we're making sure that all Arizonans can thrive. And I think I look at it really holistically. Part of that is being a social worker, but I think also just a leader. And certainly the tax climate is important, but there's so many things that we need to tackle to ensure that that businesses have the workforce that they need to have the workers that they need. So that means investing in education, certainly expanding STEM access for students, dual enrollment to get students on a path to college, technical education programs that allow them to get into a good paying job that doesn't need a college degree. Those are all really critical, but it starts with investing way back in pre-K so that students are set up for success early in their school careers, or we're never going to get to that high school and post-secondary attainment that we need. So that's critical. We're in a bit of a housing crisis. That's also a workforce issue, and water. We have to tackle our water issues in a sustainable way, because that story is also going to hinder businesses coming here. Now, we have a foundation of excellent leadership on water. We're thriving in the middle of a desert. So we need to build on that and tackle these issues in a very comprehensive way with leadership at the state level that can bring all those disparate interests together.
Absolutely. And I think to your point, that's not a place where you can involve yourself in soundbite politics. This is real policy that's absolutely critical. And it seems like we've done a great job so far. Now it's the pivot for the 2.0, and where are we going to go with that?
Yeah.
I heard you mention when you speak, but also just now, the idea that you want to create an Arizona for everybody. What does that mean?
Well, I think obviously the economy is going really well, but we know there's a lot of folks that aren't benefiting from that. Arizonans are being priced out of housing, and we're seeing homeless populations more than we've ever seen before. I think it's about the number, the increase in homelessness from 2014 is I think in 200%, if I'm remembering that number correctly. It might be more. It's a huge number. I talked about the folks that we've invited up to the 9th floor, a lot of tribal communities. They should be benefiting from this economic growth as well. And so we're really looking at how we expand those opportunities across the state, not just focusing on Maricopa County, but those communities that are important to our state but have often been shut out of economic opportunity. That's really what that means to me, and we're going to continue finding ways to hear from those communities and working with them to so that we're all benefiting from the growth we're experiencing.
So it sounds like there's a really strong economic development component to what you're talking about.
Absolutely, yeah.
And especially when you look at the rural areas, I think you're right. There's a very big disparity in terms of the economy in Maricopa County, for instance, and some of our rural counties.
Yeah. Well, and I think an important piece of that puzzle, too, is broadband access. And I mentioned the sort of historic moment we're in. It's not just in Arizona, but the level of federal investment that's available right now that we should be capitalizing on that will bring this economic growth. Broadband investment is a big piece of that. The bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act, and by working to leverage those dollars and capitalize on that investment, we can really set ourselves up for growth across the state.
Let me pivot a little bit, because I think what you're talking about is going to require some really big solutions. And to your point about the idea that we need to have sort of bipartisan solutions, you signed a few bills, but I think Governor Napolitano's veto stamp is getting well used.
Yes.
What's the path here to bipartisanship? Clearly, the budget's going to be bipartisan.
Yeah.
There's no question, correct? But what's the path here, and how do we sort of get out of this cycle of polarization from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's clear, and I mean, I've made clear that I want to put the partisan politics aside and get to work on these big solutions that are going to require people coming together. And we've had some opportunity to do that. I also made it clear I'm not going to entertain things that aren't really solving problems, solutions waiting for a problem, things that take away people's fundamental freedoms. But I think there's kind of a mix of both going on. I've had individual conversations with legislators across the spectrum in terms of ideology, to find common ground, things that we can work on: transportation, broadband investment, election reforms, those kinds of things that are critical. But also, we're having meaningful conversation with legislative leadership on a bipartisan budget that can make it out of both chambers and get my signature. And I don't think anyone thought we'd be sitting here less than 100 days into the session, right at 100 days of my administration, and having these conversations. And so it does show you that even if there's a lot of places where we don't agree, when we need to, we can come together and solve these tough issues.
And what role do you think the business community can play in that?
I think the business community is really critical. And that's been the case during my entire time at the legislature as well. I think we are seeing a level of extremity that doesn't always listen as much as it used to, but it's critical to have that outside voice saying this is important for our communities, for our state, for strategically into the future. That sort of voice of reason and experience of knowing what it's going to take. Some of these folks at the legislature don't know what it's like to run a business, a small business or otherwise. They are maybe there because of whatever ideological issue drove them to run for office. And so whatever the issue, the business community has often been the voice of reason, and it's really critical.
Thank you for that. You mentioned earlier dual enrollment. From our perspective, more jobs than people in Arizona. I never thought I would say that, right?
Yeah.
And we struggle now to fill these roles. I know one of the things you talked about was a significant investment in dual enrollment and credentialing for kids. Talk to us a little bit about that priority and why.
Well, workforce is an issue I hear from every business leader I talk to, and not just business leaders, but every sector of the economy. It's a huge issue impacting our state. And if we're going to continue to grow, we have to have the workforce to do that. And, it's a win-win for Arizonans too. Getting people into those jobs that are being created is oftentimes jobs that don't need a college degree, but might need some post-secondary attainment that allows them to raise a family, support a family, and have good benefits and a good career is really critical. And it's part of how that Arizona for everyone, that everyone's benefiting from. So dual enrollment is such an important piece of that. And I had the chance to talk to a lot of students who have benefited from dual enrollment and hearing their stories about how they grew up in families that didn't see college attainment as something they could get to. But having that exposure and access to dual enrollment while they're still in high school, first of all, shaves some of the cost of a college education off for them, but also proves to them that they could go to college, even if they didn't have that example in their family. And it's so critical for getting those students into the pipeline for post-secondary attainment.
Well, that point's so well taken. In our work with Elevate Ed, we're working with high schools across Maricopa County, and you hear that. Well, college isn't for me; it's for those kids. Like, no, your zip code doesn't dictate where you go to college or not. And I love the fact that we're going to give all Arizonans this opportunity. Yeah. And certainly, to your point, there's a bottom line component as well.
Yeah, and it's certainly something at the legislature that has bipartisan support, and I'm optimistic about the budget.
Absolutely. You also mentioned transportation. We had a run at Prop 400 last year, and you've talked about the importance this year. Yeah. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, Prop 400, while it is a Maricopa County issue, it is important not just for the region, but for the state. Without Prop 400, an extension, then you have Maricopa County competing for these dollars that are so critical to transportation infrastructure in the rural areas. And so it's important for everyone. In terms of what Prop 400 has done for the region, and you can see it if you look at maps pre-Prop 400 and just the transportation infrastructure that has grown with the region. And it's so important for the economy, for getting goods across the state, but also for getting people to work, for getting seniors to their appointments, families out for a night of entertainment, and the transit piece of it is as critical as the transportation piece. So I've made it clear where I'm at with a Prop 400 extension that makes it to my desk that it needs to include transit. I'm also hopeful that it will get across the finish line, and I will not surprise anyone like the previous governor did by vetoing that bill.
We thank you for that. That certainly would be it'd be nice to have that across the finish line. Recently, you had the first International State of the State address, which you conducted, and in my memory, probably one of the first governors I can remember that went and met with President Lopez Obrador as well at his invitation. Why is international important in Arizona?
Well, with the president of Mexico, for sure. I mean, Mexico is our most important trade partner. You know that. And we had the opportunity to talk about cross-border infrastructure projects. And how important that is for our continued trade, economic development in Arizona. And so it's important to show our commitment to those projects, which we are absolutely committed to. So that was critical. And I think, and also meeting with the governor of Sonora, Durazo, he sees this as a chance to reestablish a relationship with Arizona that I think had been maybe a little bit lacking previous in his term. So I'm excited about that. The international state of the state. I mean, Arizona is clearly on the international stage, and it's a place where people, not just across the country, but across the world, want to come do business. We're right now, and I announced this during the International State of the State, a top target for foreign direct investment. We just had this huge announcement of LG as the not just the largest, but the only battery manufacturers in North America. And our office is creating an international affairs role, which I also announced during that address, which is critical to just focus on those diplomatic relationships that are going to help, at the end of the day, economically benefit Arizonans by the opportunity to expand business in Arizona. So.
Well, and no doubt it's so critical. And amazing announcement about LG. Do you see for perhaps a chance for sort of EV/battery manufacturing to have a sort of a center here in the Southwest in Phoenix?
I mean,
Phoenix area?
Yeah, it's happening. I mean, we're seeing us emerge as this hub of technology and innovation. Batteries are certainly a part of that. And as well as the supply chain that goes into manufacturing. And we're seeing with huge investments like Taiwan Semiconductor, with Intel's expansion. I'm actually leaving here and going to tour the new Intel. The supply chain that's coming along with them. So we're onshoring, reshoring, and making it easier to do that business, because we're not relying on the supply chain that's coming from across the ocean.
I agree. I think your point is well taken. I think one of the biggest surprises with TSMC was all of the suppliers that are now coming to Arizona. It's just astounding to see, and I certainly didn't anticipate that.
Yeah.
You a few minutes ago, you referenced water. I understand the White House had a group of folks here in Arizona talking about water infrastructure. Can you let us in on those discussions a little bit? Is there anything you can tell us about that?
Yeah, sure. So, well, first I want to say I think the water conversation is so important when we're talking about this kind of new investment in Arizona. With something that's a really water intensive process like semiconductor manufacturing, that we're working closely with our Department of Water Resources and the Commerce Authority, and so that when we're growing the right way and strategically, and making sure that we have the resources we need to continue down this path. So that's really critical. So the announcements that were made last week include historic agreements between the Fort McDowell Indian community and Gila River Indian community in terms of water that they will leave in Lake Mead that will help with the issues there. Coming at a really opportune time when we've had a really wet winter. And then investment in water infrastructure, particularly in the Gila River Indian community, which is really important. And really, I think, sets up the model for the kind of conservation that we can do across the state and across the country and other areas that are affected by drought as well.
So you might not have been briefed on this yet, but just want to ask, wet winter, everyone's, looking at California, they have lakes that haven't been around for a while. Coming back, is this helping? I'm assuming it's maybe just a little bit of a drop, maybe some relief, or is it significant?
It is relief more than anything, and I think with climate change, we're going to see this kind of really cycles where we have more wet winters, but then also more intense drought in the summer, and what that leads to then is more fuel for wildfires, which is also part of this cycle. So it's a little bit of a mixed blessing. The other thing is just the perception, like, oh, we have all this water now, we're okay. SRP system is above capacity. But it comes with its challenges too.
Absolutely. You're continuing to build your administration. Any department or any agencies you're really focused on right now?
Well, I mentioned the collaboration with ADWR and the Commerce Authority. I think that's really critical as we have these continued conversations about how we continue to grow in Arizona. I think also what I'm really excited about is our tribal affairs. We have now tripled the size of tribal affairs from 1 staff to now 3, and we're having really meaningful dialogue with our tribal communities about economic development, about issues that are important to them that haven't been on the table, and I'm very excited about that.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So just as we kind of wrap up, I think people would love to know, what's it like? You're elected, you're sworn in, you walk into that office, that first. What is that like?
Yeah. So I think the 9th floor has the best view in all of Arizona.
Agreed.
And it's really special. I was there. We were in the office the day before. I guess it was New Year's Day because we took the oath on the 2nd. And it was rainy that day, and there was this rainbow. So I have a picture of that. And it just reminds me of the opportunity that I have every day to help improve the lives of Arizonans. I hope I never take that for granted. And I am just really incredibly grateful to Arizonans for putting their trust in me to do this. It's an immense job with a lot of responsibility, and I am really hopeful for the future of our state, and excited to be leading at such an exciting time in our state.
It really is. And I was, it made me also hopeful to see that, the letter you got from Governor Ducey and the fact that there's some continuity in government, the fact that there's still that.
Yes, yeah.
It was good to see that.
Yeah, I think, there was a lot of noise during the campaign. Some people are still making that noise, and it's way in the distant past now. I'm just focused on what we need to do to move our state forward.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you. It's been such a delight to have. We're going to do a quick lightning round. I promise these are easy. We'll start with the first one. First job.
Burger King.
Burger King. What did you learn?
Everything is about a team. I did every job there: fry cook, make burgers, cashier, drive-through. I was a production leader, and you can't do all those things by yourself. There's a team everywhere.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What was your favorite thing there?
I like drive-through.
Yeah?
Yeah.
That's a fast one, because you've got to you got a double task there.
Yeah.
I always feel bad because you pull up and they're talking to the other person. You don't know.
Oh yeah.
Right?
It's a lot of multitasking. Yes. There was not a lot of the technology that there is today.
And I see so many leaders who started out like their first jobs in fast food because it was such an important training ground for them. Now, obviously, you have one of the best jobs we can imagine. But if you couldn't have this, what would be your dream job?
So in 8 years, when I'm done being governor, I think I'm going to sell everything and buy a camper and be a host at a campground.
Oh, that's such a good answer.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
I love that. And then final, what a hidden talent that you might have that we might not know about?
I'm a bit of a pool shark.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. We didn't know that. What does that mean necessarily? You like to swim a lot?
Oh no, no.
Pool. Pool.
Yes, bar
See,
pool.
Look, how
bar
embarrassing.
Pool. Bar pool.
So, right, for the governor, I screwed up. So you're good at pool.
Yeah.
Excellent. Wow. Okay. Well, we'll have to maybe one day these days we'll be able to test you on that.
Okay.
Governor, thank you for spending so much time with us. Thank you for your leadership. Appreciate everything. We'll look forward to working with you in the next 8 years.
Thank you.